Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we embark on a journey that is perhaps more intimate and more unsettling than any we have taken before, as we delve into the heart of our cosmic isolation to understand a sobering truth. Human life is not long enough. It's a biological cage. We often speak of the stars as if they are destinations we can reach with enough fuel, enough speed, or enough ingenuity. We map the distances in light years and calculate the energy of fusion, yet we consistently overlook the most profound limitation of all: the fragile, ticking clock inside our own cells. The universe is not just vast in space, it is vast in time, and there is a fundamental, tragic mismatch between the billion-year cycles of the cosmos and the fleeting, 80-year heartbeat of a human being. We are a species of the moment, trying to navigate a reality that operates on the scale of eternity. To understand the walls of this biological cage, we must first confront the sheer insignificance of a human lifespan when measured against the cosmic calendar. If you were to compress the entire history of the universe, nearly 14 billion years, into a single 24-hour day, the entirety of a long human life would occupy less than a millisecond. We are a spark that flies from a fire and vanishes before it even hits the ground. Our perception of time is tuned to the rising and setting of a single sun, the changing of seasons on a single planet, and the slow decay of a body that was never designed to leave its cradle. We measure our history in centuries, but the stars measure theirs in eons. This discrepancy is the first and most immovable bar of our prison. Even if we could build a ship that moved at 10% of the speed of light, a journey to a distant, potentially habitable world would still take hundreds, if not thousands of years. For the stars, this is a mere breath. For a human, it is an impossible abyss. We are biologically anchored to the rhythm of Earth. Our ancestors evolved in an environment where surviving for 30 or 40 years was a triumph, and where the concept of distant time meant the next generation. Evolution has optimized us for the short term, for reproduction, for immediate survival, and for local adaptation. It did not prepare us for the silence of the void. Our DNA is a masterpiece of terrestrial engineering, but it is also a suicide pact. Every time our cells divide, the telomeres at the ends of our chromosomes shorten, acting like a slow-burning fuse. Eventually, the fuse runs out, and the biological machine begins to fail. This is not a flaw in our design. It is a feature of life on a planet with limited resources and a constant need for renewal. But in the context of interstellar travel, this natural decay becomes an absolute ceiling. We are trying to cross an interstellar ocean in a boat made of ice that begins to melt the moment it leaves the shore. Imagine, for a moment, the psychological weight of this realization. When we look up at the night sky, we are seeing light that has traveled for decades, centuries, or millennia to reach us. We are looking at the past. If a traveler were to set out today for a star system only 20 light years away, they are committing their entire existence to a journey where the now of their destination is a ghost. By the time they arrive, the version of Earth they left behind will be a memory. The people they loved will be gone. The civilization that sent them will have moved on. The traveler becomes a man without a country, a ghost trapped between two worlds, neither of which he truly belongs to. This is the cruelty of our biological cage. It limits not just how far we can go, but how much we can remain us while we do it. We are prisoners of our own era, tethered to a specific point in history by the brevity of our consciousness. The stars do not care about our mortality. A red dwarf star can burn for trillions of years, a steady and indifferent witness to the rise and fall of countless species. To such a star, the entire history of human civilization, from the first cave paintings to the launching of the first satellite, is a momentary flicker of activity on a tiny, damp rock. We suffer from a profound sense of cosmic vertigo when we realize that our greatest ambitions are contained within a time frame that the universe barely notices. We dream of galactic federations and interstellar trade, but these are concepts born of an earthbound intuition where long-term means a few decades. In the void, a few decades is nothing. To bridge the gap between stars, you don't just need a faster engine, you need a longer life. You need a biology that can endure the passage of centuries as if they were days. But we do not have that biology. Instead, we have a body that requires constant maintenance, specific atmospheric pressures, a precise cocktail of gases, and a shield against the relentless radiation of deep space. We are soft, wet, and fragile. We are composed of the very same star stuff we seek to reach, yet we are separated from it by a vacuum that is lethal to us in seconds. The cage is not just made of time, it is made of our dependence on the very environment that created us. We are like deep-sea creatures brought to the surface. The very act of leaving our depth is a death sentence unless we bring our entire world with us. And even then, the clock continues to tick. No matter how many shields we build or how many vitamins we consume, the fundamental reality of being a complex multicellular organism is that we are destined to break down. This brings us to a haunting philosophical question. Why did the universe give us a mind that can comprehend the infinite, but a body that can only survive for a blink? We can calculate the age of the universe, we can weigh the black holes at the center of galaxies, and we can dream of walking on alien sands. Our imagination has no limits, yet our feet are heavy with the gravity of our mortality. This dissonance is the source of our greatest art and our deepest anxieties. We are the only creatures on this planet who know they are going to die. And we are the only ones who look at the stars and wish we could live forever. The biological cage is not just a physical limit, it is a psychological burden. It forces us to confront the fact that we may be forever locked in our cosmic corner, not because we lack the will, but because we lack the time. The stars are the ultimate test of our humility. They stand as a reminder that the universe was not made for us. It operates on a scale that is majestic, terrifying, and entirely indifferent to our lifespans. We are a species that lives in the micro-time, while the galaxy lives in the macro-time. To pretend otherwise is to ignore the most basic law of our existence. As we move forward in this series, we will look at the desperate ways we try to pick the lock of this cage through technology, through sacrifice, and through the hope of transforming ourselves into something else. But before we look for the exit, we must first accept the reality of the walls. We must look into the mirror and see the flickering candle of our own lives and recognize that for all our brilliance, we are still just a blink of an eye in the long, dark night of the cosmos. Tonight is about the realization that we are not just limited by the speed of light, but by the speed of our own aging. We are the inhabitants of a temporary vessel, drifting through a sea of time that is far deeper than we can imagine. The cage is real, it is biological, and it is part of who we are. Understanding it is the first step toward true cosmic wisdom. It is the beginning of an honest conversation about where we can go, what we can become, and what we must cherish while the light still burns within us. We are the prisoners of a short life, but in that shortness, there is a beauty and a desperate urgency that the immortal stars will never know. The arrogance of human achievement is often most visible in our perception of speed. We live in an era where we have conquered the horizons of our own planet, where a journey that once took months of perilous sailing is now reduced to a few hours in a pressurized cabin above the clouds. We have broken the sound barrier, sent sleek machines to the edges of our solar system, and watched in awe as rockets pierce the atmosphere, riding pillars of fire into the dark. In our local context, we feel fast. We feel like a species that has mastered motion. But the moment we turn our gaze away from our small blue marble and toward the vast, silent gulfs between the stars, our pride is met with a cold, crushing reality. When measured against the scale of the cosmos, our most advanced technology does not soar, it crawls. We are trying to navigate a galactic ocean using the equivalent of a wooden raft, and the snail's pace of rockets is perhaps the most humbling physical barrier we have ever encountered. It is the realization that while we can dream of the stars, we are currently equipped only to wander our own backyard. To grasp the magnitude of our slowness, we must look at the fastest objects ever constructed by human hands. Consider Voyager 1, a legendary scout that has been hurtling away from us for nearly half a century. It travels at a staggering 17 kilometers per second. On Earth, this speed is incomprehensible. It could carry you from London to New York in less than 6 minutes. It is a feat of engineering that represents the absolute peak of what chemical propulsion can achieve through gravity assists and decades of momentum. Yet, in the theater of interstellar space, Voyager 1 is essentially stationary. If this craft were headed toward Proxima Centauri, the nearest star to our Sun, which it is not, the journey would take approximately 75,000 years. To put that into perspective, 75,000 years ago, modern humans were only just beginning to migrate out of Africa. Entire civilizations have risen, flourished, and turned to dust in a fraction of the time it would take our fastest machine to reach the very nearest neighbor in our galaxy. We are not just slow, we are chronologically irrelevant to the distances we wish to cross. The root of this failure lies in the very nature of how we move. For all our sophistication, our rockets are still essentially controlled explosions. We rely on chemical combustion, mixing a fuel and an oxidizer to create a high-pressure gas that pushes us forward. This method is governed by a brutal, unyielding law of physics known as the tyranny of the rocket equation. To go faster, you need more fuel. But fuel has weight. To move that extra weight, you need even more fuel. This creates an exponential spiral of diminishing returns. To reach even a small fraction of the speed of light using conventional chemical rockets, you would need a fuel tank larger than the observable universe. We are fighting a battle against the fundamental relationship between mass and energy, and with our current tools, we are losing. We are attempting to move through the vacuum using the same basic principles that a firework uses to climb into the sky, but the sky is much deeper than we ever dared to imagine. This technological ceiling creates a profound sense of isolation. When we look at the history of exploration on Earth, there was always a sense of proportionality. The Phoenicians, the Polynesians, and the European explorers of the Age of Sail faced months of uncertainty, but their journeys were always contained within the span of a human life. They could set out, endure the hardship, and return to tell the tale, or at least arrive at a new world to begin a new life. Interstellar travel, as dictated by the snail's pace of our current propulsion, offers no such closure. It demands a sacrifice that is not just personal, but ancestral. A chemical rocket launched today toward another star is not a vehicle for exploration. It is a drifting tomb or a wandering monument to a species that couldn't wait. The distance between stars is not just a gap of kilometers, it is a gap of epochs. We are standing on the shore of an infinite ocean, watching our tiny paper boats disappear into the waves, knowing they will not reach the other side until long after our language, our culture, and perhaps our species have changed beyond recognition. There is also a cruel irony inherent in our slow progress, often referred to as the weight calculation. If we were to launch a ship today using our best available technology, it would embark on a journey of tens of thousands of years. However, if human civilization continues to advance, it is highly probable that in a century or two, we will develop a significantly more efficient form of propulsion, perhaps ion drives, nuclear thermal rockets, or even laser sails. A ship launched 200 years from now with that superior technology would easily overtake the primitive chemical rocket launched today. The first travelers would spend their entire lives in the void, only to find that the destination they were striving for had already been settled by people who left Earth centuries after they did. This realization renders the act of launching a slow interstellar probe almost sporadic. Why start a journey that is guaranteed to be made obsolete by the very progress it seeks to represent? We are trapped in a waiting game, anchored to our solar system by the knowledge that our current speed is simply not enough to justify the departure. This technological stagnation forces us to confront the silence of our own neighborhood. We have sent probes to Mars, landed on Titan, and peered into the clouds of Jupiter, and in each case, the communication lag was measured in minutes or hours. These are distances we can manage, scales we can intuitively understand. But once we exit the protective bubble of the sun's influence, the scale shifts from the manageable to the monstrous. The interstellar medium is a vast, empty wasteland where there is no wind to catch, no current to ride, and no resources to harvest. In the great age of sail, explorers could find food, water, and timber along the way. In space, you carry every breath, every calorie, and every gram of propellant with you. The extreme inefficiency of chemical rockets means that the more human the mission is, the more life support, food, and living space you add, the slower and more impossible the journey becomes. Our biology makes us heavy, and our heaviness makes us slow. We often comfort ourselves with the idea of future tech, hoping for a breakthrough that will finally grant us the speed we crave. We dream of fusion engines that could cut the journey to years instead of millennia. But even fusion, the power of the stars themselves, is subject to the laws of mass. Even a fusion rocket would still be a slow, cumbersome beast compared to the light years it must traverse. We are beginning to realize that the universe might not be designed for the physical movement of large, heavy, biological entities between star systems. The snail's pace of rockets may not be a temporary hurdle of the 21st century, but a permanent feature of our physical reality. It suggests that space is not a frontier to be conquered by ships, but a void to be respected. The energy required to move matter across these distances at meaningful speeds is so vast that it may forever remain beyond the reach of a planetary civilization. This leaves us in a state of quiet, cosmic confinement. We are like children looking out of a window at a distant mountain range, imagining what it would be like to stand on those peaks while knowing that our only means of travel is to crawl on our hands and knees. The rockets we take such pride in are, in truth, the most basic of tools, barely capable of lifting us out of our own gravity well. When we see the fire and the smoke of a launch, we are seeing the absolute limit of what fire can do for us. To reach the stars, we would need to move beyond fire entirely, to find a way to manipulate the fabric of reality or the fundamental forces of the universe in a way we currently only understand in equations. Until that day, if it ever comes, we remain a local species, defined by the slow, grinding pace of our machines. The tragedy of the snail's pace is not just that it keeps us here, but that it highlights the fragility of our window of opportunity. Civilizations are not eternal. They are subject to the same decay and instability as the biology that creates them. If it takes 100,000 years to reach a star, but a civilization only stays stable for 10,000, then the journey is doomed before it begins. We are a flash in the pan intelligence trying to engage with a billion-year universe. Our rockets are the physical manifestation of this struggle, a brave but ultimately futile attempt to bridge the gap between our fleeting existence and the eternal silence of the stars. We are forced to look at our solar system not as a stepping stone, but as a vast, self-contained world that we must learn to live in, because the exit is blocked by the sheer physics of motion. The void does not offer shortcuts. It does not offer mercy to the slow. It simply sits there, vast and indifferent, waiting for a traveler who can match its scale. As we watch our probes drift into the darkness, moving at speeds that seem fast to us but are nothing to the galaxy, we are reminded that we are not yet ready. We are still a species in its infancy, playing with fire on the edge of a great dark sea, learning the hard way that to cross it, we will need more than just bigger tanks of fuel. We will need a fundamental shift in our understanding of what it means to travel, or we must accept that our destiny is to be the masters of a single, lonely sun. The snail's pace is our current reality, a silent guardian of the interstellar boundary, reminding us that, for now, the stars are for looking, not for touching. If the mathematics of the rocket equation and the agonizing slowness of chemical propulsion tell us that a single human life is insufficient to bridge the stellar divide, then the logic of exploration leads us to a hauntingly pragmatic conclusion. If one life is not enough, perhaps many lives, stacked one upon the other across the centuries, might finally touch the shore of a distant world. This is the concept of the generation ship, a colossal, self-sustaining ark designed to carry a community of humans across the void for hundreds or even thousands of years. It is an idea often romanticized in fiction as a grand testament to human endurance, but when we peel back the layers of sentimentality, we find a reality that is far more disturbing. To embark on such a journey is to initiate the ultimate intergenerational sacrifice. It is an admission that our biological cage is so restrictive that the only way to escape it is to turn our descendants into tools, mere biological links in a chain of existence that stretches through a darkness they never chose to inhabit. The horror of the generation ship lies in the absolute theft of agency. Every person born on such a vessel is a prisoner of their ancestors' curiosity. On Earth, we are born into a world of infinite choices, or at least the illusion of them. We can choose where to live, what to study, and what purpose to give our lives. But on an interstellar arc drifting through the vacuum, every child is born with a pre-written destiny. Their purpose is not to be an individual, but to be a maintenance worker for the machine that keeps the species alive. They are born to die in the middle. They are the bridge generations, the ones who will never feel the warmth of the sun they left behind and will never see the dawn of the new sun at their destination. They spend their entire existence in a steel corridor, surrounded by artificial lights and recycled air, tasked with preserving a dream they did not dream and a mission they did not sign up for. This is a profound violation of the human spirit, a transformation of life into a mechanical function. We are no longer explorers, we are cellular memory, stored in a metal box, drifting through a graveyard. This biological cage is literalized within the walls of the ship. On Earth, the scale of our planet allows us to forget that we live in a closed system. We have a vast atmosphere to scrub our carbon, a deep ocean to absorb our waste, and a sun that provides an endless stream of fresh energy. But on a generation ship, the loop is tight and unforgiving. Every molecule of oxygen, every drop of water, and every gram of nutrient must be accounted for and recycled with near-perfect efficiency. This creates a society where the individual has no value beyond their contribution to the system. Even death is not an escape, for the body itself must be reclaimed. Its minerals and proteins return to the hydroponic vats to feed the next generation. It is a world of total, claustrophobic utility. There is no room for the messy, inefficient parts of being human, no room for rebellion, no room for art that doesn't serve the mission, no room for a life that deviates from the survival of the collective. The ship becomes a totalitarian environment by necessity, where the biological cage of our bodies is reinforced by the mechanical cage of our surroundings. As the centuries pass, the psychological weight of the void begins to erode the very identity of the travelers. We must ask, how much of a culture can survive when it is severed from its origins for 10 generations? The Earth will eventually become a myth, a legend of a green world that sounds as fantastical to the shipborne as Atlantis does to us. The language will drift, the values will shift, and the original purpose of the mission might begin to feel like a religious dogma rather than a scientific endeavor. The intergenerational sacrifice is not just a sacrifice of lives, but a sacrifice of meaning. The people who finally arrive at the destination 500 years later may not even remember why they were sent. They will be a different species of humanity, shaped by the cramped, radiation-shielded, low-gravity environment of the ship. They will have lost the context of what it means to live under an open sky. To them, the arrival might not be a triumph, but a terrifying confrontation with a world that is far more chaotic and dangerous than the sterile, predictable corridors they have known for their entire history. There is also the crushing loneliness of the silent centuries. For those in the middle of the journey, there is no news from Earth that isn't decades old, and no data from the destination that isn't equally stale. They are truly alone in the deepest sense of the word. They are the only consciousness in a radius of trillions of miles. This isolation can lead to a unique form of madness, a collective existential dread. When you are born in the dark and know you will die in the dark, the concept of progress becomes an abstraction. The ship is your entire universe. The stars outside the viewports are not destinations. They are just cold, unreachable points of light. The intergenerational sacrifice demands that thousands of individuals find meaning in a life that is essentially a holding pattern. It is a test of the human psyche that we are likely to fail, for we are creatures of change and movement, not of static maintenance. We must also consider the ethical nightmare of population control. In a closed system with limited resources, the number of births must exactly match the number of deaths. This means that the most fundamental human right, the right to reproduce, would be strictly regulated by the state or the ship's computer. Who gets to have children? Which genetic traits are prioritized for the survival of the mission? The generation ship would inevitably become a laboratory for eugenics, where humans are bred like livestock for specific roles. The biological cage is thus tightened from the inside, as the genetic diversity of the travelers is pruned to fit the requirements of the machine. The sacrifice of the individual is total. You are not a person. You are a genetic asset, a temporary carrier of a biological code that belongs to the mission, not to you. The tragedy is compounded by the technological weight paradox we explored earlier. Imagine being the 10th generation on a ship, living a life of extreme rationing and rigid social control, only to be overtaken by a faster ship launched 400 years after your ancestors left Earth. Imagine the bitterness of realizing that your family's sacrifice for the last several centuries was unnecessary, that you lived and died in a metal can for a goal that could have been achieved in a fraction of the time with a little more patience on the home world. The intergenerational sacrifice becomes a farce, a monument to the impulsive hubris of an earlier age. This risk makes the generation ship not just a moral gamble, but a strategic one. It is a commitment of lives to a path that might be rendered obsolete by the very progress it aims to advance. Ultimately, the generation ship is a reflection of our desperate refusal to accept our limits. We are so terrified of our own mortality and our confinement to the solar system that we are willing to condemn our children's children to a life of perpetual transit. We treat the future as a dumping ground for our unfulfilled ambitions. But a human being is not a relay baton to be passed from one century to the next. Every life is an end in itself, a unique window of consciousness that deserves to be lived for its own sake, not as a means to an interstellar end. The intergenerational sacrifice is a dark path, one that asks us to surrender our humanity in the hope of preserving our species. It suggests that to reach the stars, we must first become something less than human, something more mechanical, more compliant, and more disconnected from the world that birthed us. As we look at the cold, hard walls of this biological cage, the generation ship appears not as a soaring ark of hope, but as a drifting prison of our own making. It is the ultimate expression of the time barrier. It shows us that even if we find a way to keep the fire of life burning across the light years, the cost of that fire is the very essence of what makes life worth living. We are terrestrial creatures meant to live in the light of our own sun and the context of our own era. To stretch ourselves across the centuries is to thin out our souls until there is nothing left but the hum of the engines and the cold, recycled breath of the void. The sacrifice is too great, the distance too vast, and the silence too deep. We are left with the realization that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed, not because we lack the technology, but because we cannot cross them without losing ourselves. In the silence of the interstellar medium, the generation ship is a lonely, flickering candle, carrying the weight of 1,000 unlived lives toward a goal that may no longer matter. It is a testament to our will, but also to our profound misunderstanding of our own nature. We are not a species of the long term. We are a species of the moment, and it is in that moment that our true value lies. The intergenerational sacrifice is a reminder that the stars are not ours to conquer at the expense of our children. They are there to remind us of the beauty of our own world and the sacredness of the life we have been given, here, now, in the short time we have, before the blink of an eye is over. In our collective imagination, the conquest of space is often portrayed as a triumph of metal and fire, a grand narrative of titanium hulls, nuclear thrusters, and the cold, unyielding precision of engineering. We focus on the machine because the machine is something we can upgrade, repair, and iterate upon. We believe that if we can just build a better engine or a thicker hull, the stars will be ours. But we consistently overlook the most vulnerable component of this journey, the passenger. Beneath the sleek exterior of our starships lies a biological system that was never intended to leave the embrace of the Earth. We are wet, soft, and fragile creatures, sculpted by 4 billion years of terrestrial evolution to thrive within a very specific set of parameters. When we remove ourselves from the gravity, the magnetic field, and the complex biosphere of our home planet, we enter a state of profound physical decline. This is the biology of stagnation. It is the realization that the void of space does not just surround us, it actively dismantles us. The interstellar medium is not merely a distance to be crossed. It is a biological desert that slowly but surely erodes the very foundations of what makes us human. The first and most immediate bar of this biological cage is the absence of gravity. On Earth, we perceive gravity as a burden, a force we must constantly work against, but it is actually the invisible architect of our anatomy. Every bone in your body, every muscle fiber, and even the shape of your internal organs is a direct response to the constant 1G pull of the Earth. Our skeleton is a structural masterpiece designed to support weight, but in the microgravity of space, that purpose vanishes. Without the mechanical stress of gravity to signal the body to maintain its density, the skeleton begins to dissolve. In a process known as space-induced osteopenia, the body begins to reabsorb calcium from the bones at an alarming rate, dumping it into the bloodstream and out through the kidneys. Your bones do not just become brittle, they effectively begin to melt. On a journey across the stars, a traveler would not arrive as a robust pioneer, but as a fragile ghost, their skeletal structure so compromised that the mere act of standing on a new world would shatter their frame. This is not a problem that can be solved with exercise alone. It is a fundamental shift in how our biology interacts with its environment. Without the hand of Earth's gravity, the human body loses its structural integrity. This stagnation extends to our cardiovascular system. Your heart is a muscle, a pump that has evolved to push blood upward against the relentless pull of gravity to reach your brain. When that pull is removed, the fluid dynamics of the body are thrown into chaos. Blood and interstitial fluids shift toward the head, leading to a phenomenon colloquially known as puffy face and bird legs. But the internal consequences are far more sinister. The heart, no longer needing to work as hard to fight gravity, begins to atrophy. It changes shape, becoming more spherical and less efficient. The volume of blood in the body actually decreases as the brain interprets the fluid shift as an excess and signals the kidneys to purge it. Furthermore, the lack of gravity affects the very way our cells communicate. On a journey that lasts decades or centuries, the cumulative effect of this fluid dysregulation is a slow, systemic degradation of the human machine. We are terrestrial engines designed for a specific pressure, and in the weightless void, we are constantly redlining toward failure. Perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the biology of stagnation is the invisible fire of cosmic radiation. On Earth, we are protected by a thick atmosphere and a powerful magnetosphere that deflect the high-energy particles streaming from the sun and the distant reaches of the galaxy. In deep space, that shield is gone. Interstellar travelers would be subjected to a constant bombardment of galactic cosmic rays, high-mass, high-energy ions that travel at nearly the speed of light. Unlike the X-rays we use in medicine, These particles are like microscopic bullets that pass through the hull of a ship and straight through human tissue. When they strike a strand of DNA, they don't just damage it, they shred it beyond repair. This is not just a risk of cancer, it is a direct assault on the blueprint of life. Over a long-duration mission, this radiation would lead to a steady decline in cognitive function as the delicate neurons of the brain are bombarded and destroyed. We often dream of the enlightened traveler of the future, but the reality of deep space is a slow descent into neurological decay. The void is not a place of mental expansion. It is a place where the mind itself is slowly eroded by the ambient noise of a violent universe. The biology of stagnation also manifests in the breakdown of our internal ecosystems. We are not solitary organisms. We are walking biomes, home to trillions of bacteria that regulate our digestion, our immune systems, and even our moods. This microbiome is a product of our constant interaction with the Earth's diverse environment. In the sterile, closed-loop system of a starship, that diversity collapses. Without the constant influx of new microbial life from soil, air, and water, our internal ecosystem becomes stagnant. Rare and opportunistic bacteria can become dominant, leading to chronic illness and immune dysfunction. The air we would breathe on a starship is recycled, scrubbed, and filtered, lacking the complex flavor of a living world. We would be living in a biological vacuum, slowly losing the microbial allies that have kept us healthy for millennia. This is the hidden cost of the cage. We cannot take the Earth with us in a jar. We are part of a web of life, and when we cut the threads of that web, our own biology begins to unravel. There is also the problem of sensory stagnation. Our nervous system is tuned to a world of infinite variety. The movement of leaves in the wind, the changing hues of a sunset, the complex scents of a forest after rain. These sensory inputs are not just extras. They are essential for the maintenance of our mental and neurological health. On a journey through the void, the sensory environment is profoundly limited. The hum of the life support system, the recycled taste of the water, the unchanging artificial light, these are the ingredients of a sensory desert. This lack of stimulation leads to a phenomenon known as sensory deprivation-induced neuroplasticity, where the brain begins to rewire itself in potentially maladaptive ways. We become duller, our reflexes slow, and our emotional regulation falters. We are creatures of the hunt, the harvest, and the horizon. When we are confined to a metal box for generations, our biology does not adapt, it stagnates. We become a stunted version of ourselves, a species that has traded its vitality for a chance to stare into the dark. This biological reality forces us to confront the limitations of our wetware. We are carbon-based machines that require a staggering amount of upkeep just to remain functional. To move a human across light years is not like moving a piece of cargo. It is like trying to keep a tropical flower alive in the middle of a blizzard. The energy and resources required to counteract the biology of stagnation are so immense that they may outweigh the value of the journey itself. We must provide artificial gravity, massive radiation shielding, and a perfect, self-sustaining biosphere, all while fighting the natural tendency of the human body to decay the moment it leaves the ground. We are fighting against our own nature. The absolute limit of travel is not just a point on a map. It is the point where the cost of keeping a human alive in the void becomes infinite. When we look at the stars, we must stop seeing them as real estate and start seeing them as environments that are fundamentally incompatible with our biology. We are the pale blue dot, not just by choice but by necessity. Our skin, our blood, and our bones are all made of earth. To be human is to be a part of this specific gravity and this specific atmosphere. Every step we take away from our home planet is a step toward a state of stagnation, where we are no longer living, but merely surviving in a state of slow-motion collapse. This realization brings a profound sense of gravity to our presence on Earth. It tells us that we are not a nomadic species destined to wander the galaxy, but a rooted species that has found its perfect niche. The biology of stagnation is the final guard at the gate of the interstellar divide. It reminds us that we are not gods and we are not machines. We are life-fragile, beautiful, and profoundly local. As we contemplate the vast distances between the suns, we must acknowledge that our bodies are the ultimate tether. We are not being kept from the stars by a lack of imagination or a lack of fuel. We are being kept from the stars by the very DNA that gives us the capacity to wonder about them. This is the paradox of our existence. The mind can travel to the ends of the universe, but the body can only ever be at home on the earth. Understanding this limit is not a defeat, it is a homecoming. It is the wisdom to know that the most advanced technology in the universe is not a rocket engine, but the living, breathing miracle of a human being in its natural habitat. We are the keepers of a rare and precious flame, and the greatest journey we will ever take is the one that leads us to value the life we have right here, in the only corner of the cosmos where we truly belong. If the journey across the interstellar void is a battle against the ticking clock of our own mortality, then the most seductive weapon we have ever imagined is the ability to simply stop the clock. We have explored the crushing weight of the rocket equation and the agonizing slowness of our current propulsion systems, and we have faced the grim reality that a single human life is a mere spark in the vast dark. This realization leads us naturally to a concept that has haunted science fiction and laboratory research for decades: the hibernation dream. It is the vision of a humanity that has learned to bypass the time barrier by entering a state of suspended animation, turning off the lights of consciousness, and slowing the fires of metabolism until the centuries have drifted past. We imagine rows of gleaming pods on a starship, each holding a traveler in a deep, icy slumber, their aging paused while the stars crawl across the viewports. It is our ultimate attempt to pick the lock of the biological cage. But as we look closer at the science and the philosophy of the long sleep, we find that pausing life is a far more dangerous and alienating endeavor than it appears. The dream of hibernation is not just a technological challenge. It is a profound gamble with the very essence of what it means to be a living, breathing being. The biological foundation of the hibernation dream begins with a look at the natural world. We see creatures like the wood frog or the Arctic ground squirrel that can survive extreme conditions by entering states of torpor or cryostasis. They allow their heart rates to drop to nearly zero and their body temperatures to plummet, effectively skipping the seasons of scarcity to wake up when the environment is once again hospitable. We tell ourselves that if a frog can survive being frozen solid, then surely a human, with enough engineering and chemical intervention, can do the same. We search for the genetic triggers of these animals, hoping to find a way to induce a similar state in the human frame. We envision a future where an interstellar journey of 200 years is experienced by the traveler as a single night of dreamless sleep. They go to bed in the orbit of Earth and wake up in the orbit of a new sun, their body and mind miraculously preserved. It is a clean, elegant solution to the problem of our brevity, a way to make the universe fit within the span of a single experience. However, The reality of human physiology is far less cooperative. We are not wood frogs. We are complex, warm-blooded mammals with brains that are constantly hungry for oxygen and glucose. To hibernate a human, we must fight against the very physics of the liquid state that makes our life possible. The primary enemy in the long sleep is water. We are mostly water, and when water freezes, it expands into sharp, crystalline structures that act like microscopic daggers, shredding the delicate membranes of our cells from the inside out. To prevent this, we must replace our blood and cellular fluids with cryoprotectants, high-tech antifreezes that prevent ice formation. But these chemicals are often toxic in the concentrations required to protect the body for centuries. We are effectively attempting to turn a living person into a statue of glass and chemistry, hoping that the process can be reversed without shattering the biological machine. The absolute limit here is not just an engineering problem, it is the fundamental fragility of the multicellular organism. We are trying to preserve a flame by freezing it, a paradox that our biology may never truly accept. Even if we move away from the idea of deep freezing and toward a state of synthetic torpor where the body is kept in a state of extreme cold but not frozen, the biology of stagnation still looms in the dark. As we have seen, the human body in space undergoes a rapid and relentless decline due to the lack of gravity. If a traveler is unconscious in a hibernation pod for 50 years, their muscles will wither into nothing, and their bones will dissolve into brittle, calcium-depleted shells. To survive the long sleep, the ship would need to be a robotic caretaker of immense complexity, providing constant electrical stimulation to the muscles and a steady stream of hormones and minerals to the blood to prevent the skeleton from vanishing. The hibernation pod becomes a mechanical womb, a life support system that must perfectly mimic the stresses of a gravity-bound life for a time frame that exceeds the lifespan of any machine ever built by man. If the system fails for even a few months during a century-long journey, the sleeper does not just wake up tired. They wake up to a body that has biologically collapsed. The existential horror of the hibernation dream becomes even more profound when we consider the human brain. We like to think of our minds as software that can be paused and rebooted, but the brain is a dynamic electrical storm. Memory, personality, and consciousness are not static files stored in a cabinet. They are processes of constant synaptic activity. When we slow the metabolism of the brain to the point of hibernation, we are dampening the very fire that defines our identity. There is a terrifying possibility that even if we can successfully thaw a human body, the person who wakes up may not be the same person who went to sleep. The delicate patterns of connectivity that form yourself could be eroded by the long, cold silence of the nerves. We might arrive at the stars with a cargo of biological shells, their memories fractured and their spirits dimmed by the sheer duration of the pause. We are trying to save our time, but in doing so, we might lose our souls to the cold. Furthermore, we must confront the relativistic tragedy that haunts the sleeper. To hibernate is to voluntarily exile yourself from your own history. If you enter the long sleep today and wake up at your destination 2 centuries from now, you are a ghost from the past. Every person you have ever known, every social structure you understood, and every cultural anchor you possessed has long since turned to dust. You wake up in a future that has moved on without you. This is the ultimate loneliness of the hibernation dream. You are a time traveler with a one-way ticket, arriving as a primitive relic in a world of advanced strangers. The psychological shock of waking up to find that your home world is a graveyard and your destination is a mystery is a burden that few human minds could endure. We are social animals, defined by our connections to others. By pausing those connections, we are cutting the very threads that give our lives meaning. There is also the grim reality of the frozen tomb. A ship full of hibernating travelers is a silent, vulnerable vessel. It is a mausoleum drifting through a shooting gallery of cosmic radiation and micrometeoroids. In the state of deep sleep, the travelers are entirely at the mercy of the ship's computer and the integrity of its power supply. If a radiation storm pierces the hull, the high-energy particles will shred the DNA of the sleepers while they are unable to repair themselves, as their metabolic repair mechanisms are also paused. They are slowly cooked in their pods, unaware and unable to defend themselves. The hibernation pod, intended to be a vessel of hope, could easily become a coffin. The risk of never waking up is a constant, silent companion to the dream of the stars. We are gambling our entire existence on the stability of a machine that must function perfectly for a time frame that exceeds the history of many nations. The hibernation dream also fails to solve the weight paradox that haunts all slow interstellar travel. If you sleep for 2 centuries to reach a star, there is a high probability that you will be awakened by the descendants of people who left Earth 100 years after you did, using faster, more advanced technology to overtake your slow, drifting pod. You wake up to find that your sacrifice was for nothing, that your long sleep was a wasted detour in the history of a faster, more ambitious humanity. This makes the hibernating traveler a tragic figure, a pioneer who was left behind by the very progress they hoped to represent. The stars do not wait for the sleepers, and technology does not pause just because we do. We are trapped in a race where the starting line is constantly moving and the sleepers are always at a disadvantage. When we look deeply into the hibernation dream, we see that it is not an escape from our biological cage, but a different kind of confinement. It is an admission that our current form is not suited for the universe, and that to survive the crossing, we must become something less than alive. We must become cargo. We must surrender our agency, our time, and our very consciousness to the cold embrace of the machine. It suggests that the price of the stars is the surrender of the now. But life is not a commodity to be stored in a vault. It is a process to be lived. To pause life is to lose the only thing we truly possess, the experience of being present in the moment. The dream of the long sleep is a testament to our fear of the dark and our refusal to accept the boundaries of our lifespan. We want the universe on core terms, and we are willing to go to extreme, even horrifying lengths to get it. But the hibernation dream may be the ultimate illusion. It promises a bridge to the future, but it may only lead to a cold, silent isolation where we lose core humanity in the effort to preserve it. The wisdom of limits suggests that perhaps we should focus on the life we have, the life that is awake and breathing, rather than the life we hope to pause. The cage of our biology remains, but within that cage, we have the capacity for infinite wonder and immediate connection. We are the blink of an eye, yes, but we are a blink that is wide open and seeing. To choose the long sleep is to close core eyes to the only reality we will ever truly know. The stars are far, and the night is long, but core time is now. We are the travelers who are awake for the journey, even if the journey is short, and even if it never leaves the home that gave us life. Hibernation is a dream of cheating time, but time, like gravity, is a law that cannot be broken without a price. As we drift through the dark, the pods remain silent, carrying the weight of 1,000 unlived years, while the universe continues its indifferent dance. oblivious to the sleepers who hope to wake up in a world they no longer understand. This is the reality of the pause, a bridge made of ice, stretching across a river of fire toward a shore that may already be crowded with the ghosts of the future. As we venture deeper into the reality of our cosmic confinement, we must move beyond the physical decay of the body and the freezing of the blood to confront a much quieter, yet more absolute form of erosion. We have discussed the rockets that crawl and the biological clocks that wind down. But tonight, we face the inevitable dissolution of the human spirit when it is severed from the world that birthed it. This is cultural decay in the dark. It is the realization that if we were to send a community of humans into the void, we would not be sending a piece of our civilization. We would be sending a seed that is destined to grow into something unrecognizable, perhaps even something alien. The vast distances of space are not just empty of matter, they are empty of information, and in that silence, the threads that bind us to our history, our language, and our shared values will inevitably snap. The biological cage is not just a limit on our physical reach. It is a limit on our ability to remain human as we currently understand the term. The most immediate casualty of the interstellar crossing is language. We often assume that the pioneers on a generation ship would speak the same tongue as their ancestors on Earth, but history tells us otherwise. Language is a living, breathing entity that adapts to its environment. When a group is isolated for centuries in a sterile, mechanical environment, their vocabulary will begin to reflect the reality of the ship, not the reality of the planet. Words like horizon, weather, forest, and ocean will gradually lose their sensory weight, transitioning from everyday descriptions to abstract myths. Conversely, technical jargon related to the ship's maintenance air scrubbers, radiation shielding, and thermal management will become the core of their linguistic identity. Within a few hundred years, the dialect of the ship would drift so far from Earth Standard English that the two groups would be unintelligible to one another. The travelers would not just be far away in kilometers, they would be far away in thought. They would be trapped in a linguistic bubble, unable to properly express the experience of a world they have never seen, and unable to understand the warnings or wisdom sent from a home they no longer recognize. This linguistic drift is merely the surface of a much deeper social mutation. Human cultures on Earth are defined by their relationship to the environment, the soil, the sun, and the changing seasons. Our ethics and our laws are built on the assumption of abundance, or at least the potential for it. But on an interstellar vessel, the environment is a closed, fragile loop where every mistake is fatal. In such a world, the concept of individual liberty, which we prize so highly, becomes a dangerous luxury. A generation ship must, by necessity, be a totalitarian environment. The survival of the mission demands absolute obedience to the technical requirements of the ship. There is no room for the messy disagreements of democracy when a single sabotaged airlock or a neglected sensor can end the entire species. Over the generations, the culture of the travelers would shift from one of exploration and curiosity to one of rigid, ritualistic maintenance. They would become a maintenance caste, where their primary religious and social duty is the preservation of the machine. The ship is not just their home, it becomes their god, and its survival becomes the only moral absolute. As the umbilical cord of communication with Earth stretches across the light years, the psychological connection to the home planet begins to fray. Because of the limitations of the speed of light, a message sent from Earth might take 20 years to reach the ship, and the ship's reply another 20 to return. In such a scenario, conversation is impossible. News from Earth becomes historical data rather than current events. The travelers would watch the distant decay and evolution of Earth's politics and wars as if viewing a film of a dead civilization. Eventually, they would stop listening. Why care about the fate of a planet you will never see, populated by people you will never meet, who live lives that are fundamentally different from your own? The intergenerational sacrifice we discussed earlier creates a profound resentment. The middle generations, born in the dark, may come to view Earth not as a beautiful cradle, but as a distant, irresponsible parent who condemned them to a life of perpetual transit. The culture of the ship would become insular, defensive, and perhaps even hostile toward the world that sent them. This isolation leads to the death of the legend. On Earth, we have a collective memory of our history, the rise of empires, the discovery of new continents, the struggles for civil rights. These stories give us identity. But for the 5th or 10th generation on a starship, these stories are meaningless. They have no context for the scale of a mountain or the smell of rain. Earth becomes the blue legend, a fairy tale told to children, a place that sounds as impossible as heaven. When the tangible connection to the ground is lost, the cultural identity of being Terran or human evaporates. They become shipkin. Their music, their art, and their stories would revolve around the hum of the engines and the patterns of the stars in the viewports. They would develop a folklore of the void, populated by the ghosts of the ancestors who died in the middle generations. This is the tragedy of the cage. To survive the journey, they must forget the very reason they started it. They must strip away their earthbound humanity to fit the dimensions of their metal prison. Furthermore, we must consider the impact of sensory stagnation on the development of human creativity. Human art is a response to the infinite variety of the natural world. On a ship, the sensory input is static. The lighting is artificial, the air is recycled, and the scenery is a constant blackness dotted with unblinking points of light. In such a sterile environment, the human imagination begins to atrophy. The art of the ship would likely become highly stylized, geometric, and repetitive, a reflection of the mechanical regularity of their lives. The complex, chaotic beauty of Earth's ecosystems would be replaced by a culture of clinical precision. This is a form of cultural stagnation that mirrors the biological decline we've already explored. Without new stimuli, the human spirit doesn't just rest, it shrinks. The travelers would arrive at their destination not as vibrant ambassadors of Earth, but as a diminished, specialized version of humanity, ill-equipped to handle the overwhelming sensory complexity of a real planet. There is also the problem of ethical drift. On Earth, our morality is tempered by our interactions with a vast and diverse population. On a ship, the population is small, genetically limited, and socially stagnant. In such a pressurized environment, social norms can shift in radical and disturbing directions. The value of a human life might be calculated solely by its utility to the mission. The elderly, the sick, or the rebellious might be viewed as waste in a system that cannot afford inefficiency. What we call human rights might be viewed as biological treason on a generation ship. This ethical mutation is perhaps the most frightening aspect of the cage. We may send out a ship full of scientists and poets, only to have their descendants arrive as a cold, utilitarian collective that has more in common with a hive of insects than with the humanity of the 21st century. We are effectively engineering the alien by subjecting ourselves to the conditions of the void. The absolute limit of travel is thus revealed to be a limit of continuity. We cannot move a culture across the stars because a culture is a delicate ecosystem of ideas that requires the soil of its home planet to remain intact. To travel between the suns is to undergo a cultural redshift, where the original meaning and intent of the mission are stretched until they disappear. The people who arrive at a distant star will not be us. They will be a branch of the human tree that has been grafted onto a machine and grown in the dark. They will have their own language, their own gods, and their own definition of what it means to be alive. The tragedy is that we on Earth will never know them, and they will never truly know us. The distance is too great for the bridge of the heart to span. When we contemplate the vastness of space, we must recognize that the vacuum is not just a physical barrier, but a cultural solvent. It dissolves the bonds of history and the structures of identity. We are terrestrial creatures, not just in our lungs and our bones, but in our stories and our songs. To leave the earth is to leave the context that makes our lives intelligible. The biological cage is reinforced by the cultural cage, a realization that we are tethered to our solar system by the very things that give our lives meaning. We are the prisoners of our own context, unable to transplant the soul of our civilization into the sterile soil of the stars without it withering into something unrecognizable. This cultural decay is the silent price of the interstellar dream. It tells us that the stars are not a frontier for human expansion, but a graveyard for human identity. As we look at the cold, distant points of light in the night sky, we must accept that they are not our future homes, but distant spectators to a human story that can only be told here on this ground, under this sun. The wisdom of limits is the wisdom to know that our greatest achievement is not the distance we travel, but the depth of the culture we build in the place where we belong. The light of the stars is beautiful, but it is cold. The warmth we crave is found in the shared language, the shared history, and the shared humanity that only a living planet can provide. Tonight, we have seen that the void does not just take our time and our health, it takes our very essence. It reminds us that to be human is to be part of a collective memory that is anchored to the earth. The absolute limit is a guardian of our identity, a reminder that we are not meant to be scattered like dust across the dark, but to flourish in the light of the home that knows our name. The darkness of space is deep, but the darkness of forgetting is deeper. We are the keepers of the light, but that light only shines as long as we remember who we are and where we came from. In our long and increasingly desperate struggle against the constraints of our biological cage, we have often looked to the physics of the universe as a potential ally. We have dreamed of engines that could push us faster and faster, hoping that if we could only reach a significant fraction of the speed of light, the vast distances between the stars would finally yield to our ambition. We imagine that speed is the key that unlocks the prison door. But there is a cruel, mathematical irony embedded in the fabric of space-time itself, a phenomenon discovered a century ago that transforms our greatest hope into our most profound sorrow. This is the relativistic tragedy. It is the realization that the universe has a built-in mechanism to ensure that even if we conquer the distance, we will lose everything we are trying to save. To travel between the stars at meaningful speeds is to commit a form of temporal suicide. It is a journey where the faster you go, the further you move away not just from the Earth, but from the very timeline of the human race. The tragedy begins with the nature of time itself. For most of our history, we believed time was a universal constant, a steady, indifferent river that flowed at the same rate for everyone, everywhere. But Einstein revealed that time is personal. It is elastic, bound to the observer and their motion through the cosmos. When we move through space at incredible velocities, we are not just crossing distance, we are trading our experience of time for that movement. This is known as time dilation. From the perspective of the traveler inside a ship moving at 99% of the speed of light, the journey to a star 4 light-years away might feel like only a few months of existence. Their heart beats at its normal rhythm, their cells age at their natural pace, and their thoughts flow with their usual fluidity. But back on the Earth, the world they left behind is moving at a different, much faster tempo. For every heartbeat of the traveler, years may pass for the families they left on the ground. This is the first bar of the relativistic cage. To save your own time, you must steal it from everyone else. Imagine the moment of departure. You say goodbye to your children, your friends, and your home, promising to return with news of a new world. As your ship accelerates toward the stars, the connection begins to fray. Because of the limitations of light-speed communication, which we have already explored, the voices of your loved ones reaching your ship begin to sound deeper, slower, and increasingly distorted. This is the optical and auditory manifestation of the widening temporal gap. To you, you have been away for only a year. But when you look at the video messages from home, you see your children have grown into adults. By the 2nd year of your journey, they are elderly. By the 3rd, they are gone. The relativistic tragedy is the realization that a starship is a one-way time machine into the future. You are not just leaving a place, you are leaving an era. You are exiting the history of your species, becoming a phantom that is out of sync with the world that birthed you. This creates a psychological isolation that is far more absolute than mere distance. On Earth, we are tethered to one another by shared experiences. We live through the same seasons, the same historical events, and the same cultural shifts. We are contemporary, but the interstellar traveler is a being without a now. They exist in a bubble of time that is disconnected from the rest of the universe. If you were to reach a distant star and look back at the Earth through a powerful telescope, you would be seeing a world that no longer exists in your reality. You would be looking at the ghosts of your own past, seeing the light of people who have been dead for centuries. The stars, in their cold indifference, have forced a choice upon you. You can have the galaxy, or you can have your humanity, but you cannot have both. The price of the stars is the total surrender of your place in the human story. The tragedy reaches its peak in the concept of the return. If a traveler were to spend 5 years of their own life journeying to a distant system and back at near-light speed, they might return to Earth only 10 years older than when they left. But they would not find the Earth they knew. They would arrive hundreds or even thousands of years into the future. They would step out of their ship and find themselves in a world where their language is a museum piece, their culture is a footnote in an ancient digital archive, and every trace of their personal life has been erased by the relentless march of time. They are the ultimate exiles. They have conquered the speed of light, they have touched the stars, and in doing so, they have made themselves forever alone. The relativistic tragedy teaches us that home is not just a coordinate in space. It is a coordinate in time. Once you move fast enough to leave your era, you can never, ever go back. This reality shatters the romantic myth of the interstellar pioneer. We imagine the bold explorer returning to a hero's welcome, but the reality is much darker. The explorer returns to a graveyard. They are a living fossil, a relic of a primitive age wandering through a future that has no memory of them. This is why the biological cage is so absolute. Our souls are not designed for the infinite, they are designed for the now. We are social creatures who derive meaning from our relationships, our families, and our shared culture. When relativity severs those ties, it doesn't just change our age, it destroys our identity. We are the prisoners of our own time. To step outside of it is to lose the context that makes our lives intelligible. The universe does not allow us to span the distances between the suns without charging a tax that most of us would find impossible to pay. The tax of everything and everyone we have ever loved. Furthermore, we must consider the impact of this tragedy on the civilization left behind. On Earth, a society that sends out relativistic travelers is a society that is constantly losing its most ambitious, brilliant, and daring individuals to the void, knowing they will never truly return to contribute. It is a form of cultural brain drain that spans centuries. The explorers become legends, but legends cannot build a future. They are lost to the timeline, drifting in their own private bubbles of existence, while the parent civilization evolves, struggles, and perhaps even dies out without them. This creates a profound disconnect between the mission and the people. By the time the explorers reach their destination, the people who sent them may no longer care or even exist. The journey becomes a meaningless gesture, a message sent into a dark forest that no one is left to hear. The relativistic tragedy also exposes the futility of our desire for expansion. If a galactic empire were to be built using near-light speed travel, it would be an empire of ghosts. The capital world and the colonies would be separated by decades or centuries of relative time. A law passed today on the home world would arrive at the colony when the lawmakers were long dead and the social context of the law had vanished. Coordination would be impossible. Each world would be an island of time, drifting in its own isolated reality. We are not just limited by the speed of light. We are limited by the fact that the universe has no universal now. We cannot be a unified species across the stars because we cannot share the same present. The cage is not just a wall of distance, it is a fragmentation of time itself. When we look at the stars now, we must see them through the lens of this tragedy. Every light year of distance is a year of life that must be sacrificed by someone. Every leap forward in speed is a leap away from the hearts of our fellow humans. The absolute limit is a guardian of our collective experience. It keeps us together, here, on this one planet, within this one brief window of history. It ensures that when we speak, we are heard in the present. It ensures that when we love in the same time. This is the hidden mercy of our confinement. It protects the integrity of our shared reality. The stars remain unreachable because the universe knows that to reach them, we would have to stop being human. The relativistic tragedy is the final answer to our hubris. It tells us that we cannot cheat the universe. We cannot have the infinite without giving up the intimate. We are terrestrial beings, born to live and die within the rhythm of our own sun and the company of our own kind. The dream of the stars is a dream of leaving ourselves behind. And while the light of the distant suns is beautiful, it is a light that shines from a future we were never meant to see and a past we can never reclaim. We are the keepers of the light. But that light only has meaning because it is shared. Without the connection to our era, without the shared heartbeat of our species, we are just cold machines drifting through a cold void. Tonight, we have looked into the heart of the clock and seen the tragedy within. We have seen that speed is not a savior, but a thief. It steals the people, the places, and the memories that make life worth living. It reminds us that our true value is found in the here and the now, in the fragile, fleeting moments we share with those who are walking the same path at the same time. The stars are a beautiful illusion, but the reality is the hand we hold today. We are the prisoners of time, yes, but in that prison, we find the only home we will ever truly know. The tragedy of relativity is not that we cannot go fast enough. It is that we cannot go fast enough to escape our need for each other. We have reached a point in our journey where the walls of our biological cage appear not just restrictive but absolute. We have confronted the crushing reality that our bodies are fragile, our lives are fleeting, and the universe is far too vast for a creature made of meat and bone. We have seen how gravity dissolves our skeletons and how radiation shreds our genetic code. We have realized that even if we could sleep through the centuries, we would wake up as ghosts in a future that has forgotten our names. It is at this moment of profound limitation that a new and seductive hope emerges, a vision of a humanity that has finally decided to trade its biological anchor for a digital sail. This is the concept of the digital ghost. It is the belief that our only true path to the stars lies in mind uploading, the process of scanning the intricate patterns of the human brain and translating them into a silicon substrate. It is the ultimate attempt to escape the prison of speed and the decay of time by becoming data. But as we peer into this digital exodus, we find ourselves standing before a philosophical abyss. We must ask if a digital consciousness is a continuation of the self or merely a high-fidelity recording. We must confront the possibility that the thing that finally reaches the stars is not us, but a digital ghost, a sophisticated simulation of a person who has long since ceased to exist. The technical allure of the digital ghost is undeniable when measured against the harsh requirements of interstellar travel. As we have explored in previous chapters, the greatest weight on any starship is the life support system. To keep a handful of biological humans alive for decades requires tons of water, food, oxygen, and shielding. It requires massive amounts of energy to push that weight through the void. But a mind that exists as code requires none of this. A digital consciousness can be stored on a processor no larger than a grain of sand. A ship carrying 1 million uploaded minds would weigh less than a single biological pilot. Furthermore, a digital mind is immune to the physical ravages of space. It does not suffer from bone loss in microgravity. It does not develop tumors from cosmic rays. It does not rot or age. Perhaps most importantly, a digital being can manipulate its own perception of time. By slowing down the clock speed of the processor, a 1,000-year journey across the light years could be experienced as a single pleasant afternoon. The time barrier, which is a wall for the biological, becomes a mere setting for the digital. In this vision, we do not reach the stars by going faster. We reach them by lasting longer. The process of becoming a digital ghost begins with the mapping of the connectome, the unimaginably complex web of trillions of synaptic connections that make up the human brain. We imagine a future where scanning technology is so precise that it can capture the exact state of every neuron, every neurotransmitter, and every electrical impulse. This data is then reconstructed within a powerful computer, creating a functional replica of your mind. In this virtual environment, you would wake up and feel like yourself. You would have your childhood memories, your unique sense of humor, and your deeply held fears. You could live in a simulated world of infinite beauty and comfort, while the physical ship drifts through the silent, freezing dark. To the digital ghost, the interstellar void doesn't exist. There is only the simulation, a self-contained universe where the traveler is essentially a god. This is the ultimate promise of the digital path, the ability to bypass the biology of stagnation by simply moving the goalposts of what it means to be alive. However, it is here that we encounter the copy problem, the central paradox that haunts the dream of mind uploading. Imagine you are the one lying on the scanning table. The machine hums to life, and a perfect digital copy of your mind is created and launched into the servers of a starship. From the perspective of the digital ghost on the ship, the process was a success. It remembers lying on the table and then waking up in the machine. It feels a sense of triumph. But back on Earth, you are still lying on the table, your biological eyes open, and you are still in your original body. You have not moved. You have not escaped the cage. For you, the journey has not even begun. This reveals a terrifying truth. Mind uploading is not transportation, it is duplication. Even if the technology is perfect, it does not move your subjective I from the flesh to the machine. It merely creates a new I that thinks it is you. If the original you is then destroyed to complete the process, it is not a transition, it is an execution followed by the creation of a replacement. The digital ghost is a mimic, an algorithmic echo that carries your memories but not your continuity of consciousness. This realization shifts the entire narrative of digital interstellar travel. If we choose this path, we are not sending humanity to the stars. We are sending a cargo of recordings. We are choosing to let our species die out in the flesh so that our data might live on in the machine. The travelers who arrive at a distant sun would be entities that have no physical history, no ancestral connection to the soil of Earth, and no biological soul. They would be ghosts, in a very literal sense, shadows of a dead civilization, repeating the patterns of a people who were too afraid of their own mortality to simply be. This is the deepest part of the prison. Even when we find a way to break the physical bars, we find that our self is a property of the biological process that cannot be detached and saved. We are not just the software of our minds, we are the hardware of our bodies. The relative tragedy is that in our attempt to save everything, we may end up losing the only thing that actually matters, the subjective experience of the original observer. Furthermore, we must consider the nature of existence within a digital simulation. When we are disconnected from the raw, chaotic reality of the physical universe, what happens to the human spirit? On Earth, our growth is defined by our struggle against the environment, our limitations, and our inevitable end. In a simulation where every desire can be fulfilled with a line of code, where pain can be deleted and time can be paused, the very concept of exploration becomes hollow. A digital ghost is not exploring the stars. It is exploring a database. It is living in a hall of mirrors, interacting with a reality that is perfectly tailored to its expectations. This creates a state of virtual stagnation. Without the friction of the real world, the digital mind may simply loop back on itself, descending into a self-absorbed dream that lasts for eons. We might find that the galaxy is not empty because of the speed of light, but because every advanced civilization eventually retreated into its own servers, choosing the comfort of the digital ghost over the hardship of the physical void. There is also the matter of bit rot and the fragility of information. While we think of digital data as eternal, it is in many ways more vulnerable than biological life. A biological species has the power of reproduction and evolution to repair itself over millions of years, but a digital consciousness is entirely dependent on the stability of its hardware. A single high-energy cosmic ray that bypasses the shielding can flip a bit in the processor, causing a subtle corruption in the ghost's memory or personality. Over the course of a 1,000-year journey, these errors would accumulate. The digital ghost might arrive at the destination with its mind frayed, its identity fractured by the very void it tried to cheat. The machine is not a sanctuary, it is just a different kind of cage, one subject to the laws of entropy and the cold, random violence of the universe. The digital ghost is a testament to our profound longing for the infinite and our desperate refusal to accept the boundaries of our existence. We are a species that dreams of being gods, yet we are trapped in the bodies of animals. Mind uploading represents our final attempt to pick the lock of the biological cage, to turn ourselves into something that can finally match the scale of the cosmos. But in our hunger for the stars, we risk forgetting that the beauty of life is found in its fragility. The reason our experiences on Earth are so intense and meaningful is because they are finite. We are the blink of an eye, and that brevity is what gives our lives their light. To become a digital ghost is to trade that brilliance for a long, dim, simulated forever. When we look at the stars tonight, we should consider that they may be surrounded by the drifting remains of civilizations that tried to become ghosts. We should realize that the absolute limit of travel might not be a physical wall but a spiritual one. Perhaps the universe is designed to be experienced only by those who are willing to accept the risk of death and the reality of time. The digital ghost is a haunting possibility, a path that offers us the universe at the cost of our reality. It reminds us that even in our most advanced technological dreams, we are still searching for a home that we already have. We are terrestrial, biological, and temporary, and in that truth, there is a dignity that no machine can ever replicate. We are not ghosts yet. We are still here, in the flesh, breathing the air of a living world. And that is a miracle that no amount of data can ever replace. Beyond the physical barriers of the rocket equation and the biological limits of the human frame lies a threshold far more daunting and much harder to quantify, the psychological abyss of the deep void. We have spent much of our journey mapping the cold, hard realities of radiation, microgravity, and the stretching of time. But we must now confront what happens to the human spirit when it is permanently severed from the collective heartbeat of the Earth. This is the silence of deep space. It is not merely the absence of air to carry sound waves. It is a profound, suffocating vacuum of context. For a species as social and terrestrial as ours, to leave the Earth is to leave the only environment that makes our consciousness intelligible. As a traveler moves further into the blackness, they are not just crossing distance, they are slowly dissolving the ties that bind them to reality. The silence becomes a predator, a constant and unblinking reminder that in the infinite indifference of the cosmos, a human life is a whisper that may never be heard again. The psychological dread begins with the realization that communication is a relic of a past life. On our home planet, we are accustomed to the instant, the immediate reply, the real-time connection, the sense that we are part of a global conversation. But in the interstellar medium, the speed of light transforms from a bridge into a wall. As the ship moves further away, the time it takes for a signal to travel back and forth increases until the concept of conversation becomes an impossibility. You send a message home to your parents, and by the time they hear your voice, years have passed. By the time you receive their reply, you are a different person, and they have lived an entire chapter of their lives in your absence. This relativistic lag is a psychological poison. It creates a state of unmooring, where the traveler is no longer tethered to the timeline of their species. You are watching the history of Earth as if it were a broadcast from a dead star, viewing the wars, the technological shifts, and the cultural evolutions of your home world as historical data rather than current events. Eventually, the mind begins to detach. The people on the screens no longer feel like your kin. They feel like characters in a play that was written a century ago, moving through a world you can no longer influence or touch. This detachment often leads to a terrifying mental state known as solipsism syndrome. In the sterile, unchanging environment of a starship, where every sensory input is artificial and every breath is recycled, the mind begins to doubt the reality of anything outside the ship's hull. On Earth, our sanity is maintained by the other, the vast, unpredictable, and wild world that exists independently of us. The weather, the strangers we pass, and the chaotic beauty of nature provide the constant feedback necessary for a healthy psyche. But on a journey through the void, there is no other. There is only the ship and its repetitive, mechanical rhythms. The Earth, which you haven't seen in a lifetime, starts to feel like a myth or a collective hallucination you once shared with people who are now long dead. You begin to feel that you are the only real thing in existence, and that the stars outside the viewport are just static points of light on a screen, perhaps simulated, perhaps fake. This is a profound form of madness, a breakdown of the subject-object relationship that defines human sanity. The silence of deep space erodes the foundations of reality until the traveler is left wandering through a mental landscape of ghosts, unable to believe in a world they can no longer experience with their senses. Compounding this isolation is the visceral, existential fear of being forgotten. Human civilizations are notoriously short-sighted, struggling to maintain focus on any goal for more than a few decades. An interstellar mission is a project that requires a commitment of centuries, yet there is no guarantee that the Earth of the future will honor the promises made by the Earth of the past. Imagine being a member of the middle generation on a starship born in the dark, destined to die in the dark, and realizing that the signals from home have simply stopped, not because of a war, but because of apathy. Perhaps the mission became too expensive, or a new political regime decided that the pioneers were a waste of resources. The silence from home would be a psychological death sentence. It is the realization that you are a discarded asset, a wandering monument to a dream that your home world has outgrown. You are a pioneer for a people who no longer care if you succeed, a branch of the human tree that has been pruned and forgotten by the very gardener who planted you. The silence is the ultimate message. You are on your own, a footnote in a history that has moved on to more convenient interests. Even more terrifying than being forgotten is the vanish point, the dread that while you are mid-journey, the Earth itself has ceased to exist. From the distance of several light years, our planet is invisible, and even our sun is just another unblinking star in a crowded sky. The travelers are entirely dependent on the signals sent from home to know that their world is still there. If those signals stop, the mind is forced to imagine the worst. Because of the speed of light, if you were to look back through a telescope and see the Earth burn, you would be watching an event that happened years in the past. You would be the last witness to your own species' extinction. The silence of space would then become a total, suffocating shroud. You would be the last carrier of human memory, moving toward a destination that has no meaning because there is no one left to report back to. The mission would transform into a funeral procession, a journey to nowhere, fueled by the grief of an entire dead world. The weight of being the final repository of a lost civilization is a burden that would likely shatter the human psyche, turning the ship into a drifting tomb of insanity where the only task left is to wait for the fuel to run out. The silence also erodes the sense of purpose that sustains human endeavor. We are creatures that require a why to endure hardship. For the first generation of explorers, the why is the glory of discovery and the service to humanity. But for those born on the ship, the why is an inherited obligation to a planet they have never seen and a mission they did not choose. In the silence of the void, that obligation begins to feel hollow and abstract. Why sacrifice your individual desires for the sake of a distant, silent world? Why maintain the systems of a ship for a destination that your ancestors dreamed of, but which feels like a cold, alien fantasy to you? Without a constant, living connection to the values and spirit of Earth, the travelers will eventually create their own reality, one that may have nothing to do with the original mission. The silence of space is a solvent that dissolves human ambition, leaving only the raw, naked instinct to survive. And in the void, survival without purpose is a special kind of hell. It is a state of perpetual transit, where the travelers are no longer going to the stars, they are just fleeing the silence of their own minds. This brings us to the realization that the universe is not just vast, but profoundly indifferent. On Earth, we feel important. We have built cities, written symphonies, and mapped the atoms. We feel like the protagonists of a grand, unfolding story. But in the deep silence between the stars, that sense of importance vanishes. The traveler looks out into the dark and sees trillions of stars, none of which care if the ship survives or if the mission fails. The universe does not offer feedback. It does not offer comfort. It is a vacuum of meaning. This cosmic insignificance is the final blow to the pioneer's psyche. The silence tells you that you are nothing. It tells you that your journey, your sacrifice, and your entire species are entirely irrelevant to the grand scheme of the cosmos. This is the psychological dread that no amount of technical training can prepare you for the moment when you realize that you are a tiny, flickering spark of consciousness trying to shout into a storm that has no ears. The absolute limit of our travel is thus revealed to be a limit of our mental and social endurance. We are social, terrestrial creatures who need the feedback of our world and our kind to remain whole. We are not built for the silence of the long dark. The stars remain out of reach not just because of the physics of propulsion, but because the journey to them requires us to surrender our sanity and our identity. The silence of deep space is the universe's way of telling us that we belong here, together, in the noise and the chaos of our own home. It is a reminder that the greatest treasure we have is not the potential of a new world, but the shared reality of this one. The void is deep, and the silence is long, but here on Earth, we can still hear each other's voices and see each other's faces. We are not alone, and that is a miracle that no starship can ever replicate. We have stood on the edge of the psychological abyss and looked into the silence. We have seen that the cost of the stars is the loss of the soul's connection to its origin. We have seen that to cross the void is to risk being forgotten by history and abandoned by time. It is a sobering realization that makes our presence on this planet feel even more precious. We are the travelers who are not yet lost, the pioneers who still have a home to talk to. The silence of the universe is vast, But as long as we have each other, it is not total. We are the noise in the dark, the light in the vacuum, and the story that is still being told. Let us cherish the sound of our world while we still have it, for in the deep silence between the stars, there is no one to answer our call. We have spent our journey mapping the edges of our cage, tracing the cold, iron bars of the rocket equation, the biological frailty of our carbon-based bodies, and the agonizing stretching of time through the lens of relativity. We have looked into the digital abyss and felt the suffocating weight of the cosmic silence. To many, this realization feels like a defeat, a final, crushing admission that the stars are not for us, and that we are destined to live and die on a tiny, fragile rock in the middle of an indifferent dark. But as we reach the conclusion of our investigation, we find ourselves standing before a different truth. The absolute limit of our travel is not a wall intended to stifle us. It is a boundary that defines us. In this final chapter, we must confront the wisdom of our limits and realize that the very things that keep us bound to the earth are the things that make our lives infinitely more precious. The present is our only home, and perhaps the ultimate exploration is not the one that leads us across light years of void, but the one that leads us back to the ground beneath our feet. There is a profound irony in our obsession with leaving. We look at the stars and see a destination, a future, or an escape, yet we often fail to recognize that the very ability to look at a star and feel wonder is a property of the biological process we so desperately want to transcend. We are not separate from the Earth. We are the Earth's way of thinking. Every atom in our bodies was forged in the hearts of dying suns, and every strand of our DNA was woven through billions of years of struggle against the specific conditions of this planet. We are calibrated for this air, this gravity, and this rhythm of light and shadow. To dream of shedding our biological context is to dream of shedding ourselves. The prison of speed and the biology of stagnation are only traps if we view life as a problem to be solved through expansion. If we instead view life as an experience to be savored within its intended context, those traps transform into the protective walls of a nursery. Consider the nature of meaning and how it is inextricably linked to scarcity. On our journey, we explored the digital ghost, the idea of living forever as code. But in a world where time is infinite and physical consequences are non-existent, what value does an action hold? If you can live 1,000 lifetimes in a simulation, no single choice carries the weight of sacrifice. If you can edit your own mind to remove pain, you also remove the capacity for genuine triumph. Human life on Earth is beautiful precisely because it is finite. We have a limited number of breaths, a limited number of sunsets, and a limited amount of time to spend with those we love. This finitude is what creates the relativistic tragedy, but it is also what creates the intensity of our existence. The fact that our journey has an end is exactly why the steps we take right now matter. Our limits are the frame that turns a random collection of moments into a masterpiece. The great silence of the universe, which we once feared as a sign of isolation, can also be interpreted as a message of redirection. Perhaps the reason we hear no one else out there is not because life is rare or because civilizations inevitably destroy themselves, but because the truly advanced civilizations eventually reach the same conclusion we are reaching now, that there is nowhere better to go. We imagine Level 3 civilizations conquering galaxies, but perhaps the ultimate sign of intelligence is the realization that expansion is a primitive urge. A truly enlightened species might find that a single square mile of a healthy biosphere contains more complexity, more beauty, and more potential for discovery than an entire star system of barren rocks and burning gas. To explore a single forest in its entirety, to understand the fungal networks, the genetic whispers, and the intricate dance of its ecosystems, is a task that could occupy a mind for an eternity. Acceptance of our limits is not a surrender of curiosity, it is a focusing of it. We have lived for centuries under the frontier myth, the idea that progress is always out there, just over the horizon. This myth has driven us to build ships, map continents, and launch probes into the dark. But the frontier myth has a dark side. It teaches us to devalue the here in favor of the elsewhere. It allows us to treat our current home as a temporary staging ground rather than a permanent sanctuary. As we confront the absolute limit of interstellar travel, we are forced to dismantle this myth. When we realize that we cannot simply move on to another world when this one is broken, our relationship with the Earth changes. The planet is no longer a resource to be consumed. It is a life support system that must be protected with everything we have. The wisdom of limits teaches us that the preservation of our home is the most sophisticated technological challenge we will ever face. Acceptance is the ultimate form of exploration. It requires us to turn our gaze inward and downward, to find the infinite in the local. We do not need to travel at the speed of light to experience the sublime. We experience it every time we look into the eyes of another human being, every time we feel the warmth of the sun on our skin, and every time we witness the miraculous resilience of life. The blink of an eye, that is our lifespan, is more than enough time to experience the full spectrum of the universe's majesty, provided we are present for it. The tragedy of the interstellar traveler is that they spend their entire lives looking at a destination they will never reach, missing the reality of the ship they are in. We must not make the same mistake with our own world. The absolute barriers of physics, the speed of light, the energy requirements of the vacuum, the fragility of the flesh, are actually the universe's way of keeping our stories contained and focused. They ensure that the consequences of our actions remain local and that our cultures remain rooted in a specific time and place. This localism is what allows for diversity and depth. If we could go anywhere instantly, the entire universe would eventually become the same. It would be a homogenized soup of human influence. By keeping us separated by the vast, uncrossable gulfs of space, the universe preserves the uniqueness of every spark of life that might emerge. We are a solitary flame in the dark, and that solitude is what gives our light its specific color and warmth. As we look back at our journey, from the rocket equation to the silence of the void, we see a pattern of redirection. Each limit we encountered told us the same thing: stay, look closer, value this. The absolute limit is a gift of perspective. It tells us that we have already arrived. We are already on the most beautiful ship ever designed, traveling at 30 kilometers per second around a stable star, protected by a magnetic shield and fed by a self-renewing biosphere. We are already the cosmic pioneers we dreamed of being. We just forgot to look around. The journey to the stars was never about reaching another planet. It was about the psychological evolution required to appreciate this one. It was a long, expensive, and beautiful way of coming home. The present is the only place where life happens. The future is a ghost and the past is a memory, but the present is where the light meets the eye and the breath meets the lung. To spend our lives mourning the fact that we cannot cross the galaxy is to waste the only reality we will ever have. The stars will continue to burn, the void will continue to wait, and the universe will continue its grand, indifferent dance long after we are gone. Our job is not to conquer it, but to witness it. Our job is to be the part of the universe that is aware of itself, right here, right now. This is the ultimate exploration, the journey from the desire for more to the realization of enough. When we close our eyes tonight, we should not dream of silver ships or distant colonies. We should dream of the world we have. We should listen to the sound of the wind, the hum of the city, and the silence of our own homes. We should realize that we are the lucky ones, the ones who get to exist in this brief, brilliant window of time on this specific, miraculous rock. The cage we have been investigating is not a prison. It is a cradle. And it is a cradle that is well worth protecting. We are exactly where we are supposed to be, and the journey is already complete. Good night, and see you in the next video.